You found yourself on another episode of Locked On Bulls. In today's episode, me and Pat are going to talk about a rumor that has the Bulls targeting Christian Wood. We also got an interesting trade proposal for Alex Caruso to the Dallas Mavericks. And lastly, what is the timeline on the Bulls actually going rebuild? We're going to talk about all that and more on today's Locked On Bulls.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily podcast on the Chicago Bulls, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. That's Pat the Designer, host and creator of the Windy City Breeze and host of the Chicago Bears podcast over at ESPN 1000. I'm Haize, host and creator of Chicago Bulls and Chicago Bears Central. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Pat, man, it's fairly quiet around the Bulls front as far as the rest of free agency. We're still kind of waiting to see what happens with Io, waiting to see what happens with this disabled player exception. And today, an interesting rumor comes out that the Bulls could be a team that keeps Christian Wood from going to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, this would mean that the Bulls would be using their disabled player exception to bring him in here. How do you feel about Christian Wood and the potential fit here if the Bulls were to seriously be interested in Christian Wood?
I said this over on the Breeze, right? To me, it's one of those things where if he comes, cool. Whoa, jeez. We haven't had one of these in a while. Jesus.
Oh, man. We made it almost a whole week without getting one,
bro. That's crazy. If he's a Chicago Bull, cool, right? But at the end of the day, I'm not losing any sleep over if the Bulls go out and get Christian Wood or not. I've seen a lot of people kind of, all of a sudden everybody's a Christian Wood fan when you want the Bulls to make a move. I don't want the Bulls to make a move for the sake of making a move. Do I see how Christian Wood helps this team offensively? I do. And I actually think that he could be a player who, when the Bulls get to a lot of those slumps that we saw last season, right, when we're talking about entire third quarters where we're not scoring for half a quarter, Christian Wood can be a player that kind of eliminates those things off of the bench. I would like to see him in that role for the Chicago Bulls. You just have to know that defensively, he's going to give you 37 points a night going the other way. Like, that's what it is. Like, he's not going to be, it's not me overselling it either. I saw that a couple of times where people were like, you kind of blowing how bad his defense is out of proportion. No, he's a bad defender. Like, it was so funny to me because I remember doing the show with doing an episode of Locked On NBA with Nick Angstead when they got Christian Wood, and it was a couple of weeks after he had him, and I was like, man, like, he's just not a good on-ball defender. Like, I watched his games, he's really bad on ball. And Nick said, if you think the on-ball is bad, wait till you see the off-ball. And when you look at him, yes, like the defensive rating, I guess it's fine, right? It's a little more than league.
Yeah.
It is what it is. But when you see it, the eye test, when you see him try to stop somebody one-on-one, you just go, oh, that's not good. And so for me, I feel like the Bulls, if they went out and got him, you just kind of have to accept that. And I think the question that I posed to the people over on the Breeze was, would you want a healthy Jabari Parker on your team?
That's a great comparison. Here's the way that I look at Christian Wood. Solid scorer, solid rebounder, and he averages a block per game for his career, right? It's all solid in those areas.
Here's the thing. It's not even solid. Not to cut you off, but it's not even solid. It's good.
Good score. Cut me off. You cut me off.
Good rebounder. I did.
Come on, bro. What are we doing here? No,
I did. My bad.
Not to cut you off, but I'm going to cut you off anyway. I was just messing with you, bro.
Ain't that when you say not to cut you off?
Yeah, exactly.
I use that.
But here's like the stat sheet watchers. I can understand why they think Christian Wood is probably a better player than what he is. He is so atrocious defensively that it's glaring. It really is. For people who actually watch the basketball, it's glaring, bro. Hey, listen. It's hard. Whoa. Damn.
We're having a tough day. We're having a tough day.
We're a very tough day. But here's the thing, though, is that you would be giving a 1-year flyer on a player that can give you a double-double if you give them I won't say double though. He can give you 16 and 7 or 16 and 8 if you give him about 20 to 22 minutes per game. The question that I would have here is that do you think we have enough defenders around him to insulate him? Because you got to think he's probably going to be in that front court with either Drummond, Patrick Williams, or Torrey Craig on either side of him. 1 to 2 of those players on either side of him at all times.
No, I do. I do believe we do. And I mean, listen, at the end of the day, you can skew the numbers however you want to skew them. You can state them however you want to state them. I think that the Bulls' problem last year was they couldn't turn defense into offense because they didn't have a point guard that was going to be able to help them. But the Bulls were a good defensive team. Like it's not just the numbers that state that. Like when you saw the Bulls, right? Like a lot of those games, with very rarely, and I think because we're so focused on the team, we don't give credit to it. But more times than not, most of our games would end with the Bulls allowing 112 to 116 points a game, something like that. I know that's still a lot of points. That's not a lot of points when you look at some of the other games around the NBA. Like when you look at some of those Sacramento games, you're like, I'm sorry, did that game end 148, 146? Like what the heck was going on there,
bro? Hey, have you ever been watching? And it's because it's the Kings who were a very highly efficient,
worst defensive team in the NBA.
But there seriously would be some games where like by the fourth quarter, you're like 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. You're like, wait a second, do they have 138 points right now? What happened, bro?
Bro, I'm telling you, like it's wild to say it because we're so insulated. And in Chicago, we have this mindset, right? The Thibodeau, the defense, the we're holding teams sub 100 points. That mess don't happen no more, bro. Like the Bulls allowing what was our defensive what's it called? Not efficiency, freaking whatever the stat is called. I can't think of it right now, where basically, right, like it tells you how many points you allow per game. Like I think the Bulls were like 112 on the season overall versus how much they actually scored. And it was just like, bro, like it's not our net rating. Our defensive net rating is the stat that I was looking for. I think we were like 112 or 113, and like our score was like 111 or 112. And it was just like, bro, like, come on, dog. Like, that's actually a good defensive team. I think the question mark, and like I said, right, like Christian Wood is a good scorer. He's a good rebounder. He's a player who I believe he's one of 3 centers in the last 5 or 6 years to shoot above 37% from behind the 3-point line. So
yeah, is a career almost 38% 3-point shooter for his career.
Offensively, he's going to give you what you want. The question is, do you want to make that commit? I guess here's my question
is, do you want Wood? That's what we're asking.
I mean, we missed out on Dick. Do you want Wood? I think the question for me is, are you okay if the Chicago Bulls go all in on just the offense? Because acquiring Christian Wood to me would do that.
Well, I don't think that you could say that even if they were to go after Wood, you've added Torrey Craig and Javon Carter in the same offseason. You've added players that play defense and can stretch the floor out. So I think if at this point, if you were to go Christian Wood, you've added defenders, so you're trying to at that point solidify scoring off your bench. So,
well, what's your role for him? I guess, right? Like, are you bringing him off of the bench, or are you bringing him here to be a starter?
I don't think you can start a front line of DeMar DeRozan, Christian Wood, and Nikola Vucevic. I just don't think you can.
You can if you're that's what I'm asking. Though. You can if your philosophy is we got to outscore these mugs. We can bring defense off of the bench, but we got to be better offensively.
See, that's the thing. I wouldn't, only because you can bring still Christian Wood off your bench, but you can have a much more solid overall rotation. Because keep in mind too, Christian Wood, while he can stretch the floor, you still don't want to make him Vooch. What you try to do with Vooch that first year, making him just because you still need somebody to stretch the floor with DeMar DeRozan on the floor. I think that you can maximize. Now, if you're talking about moving DeMar to the bench, which we all know is not happening, that's a different story. But I don't think you can. I even with if you say you're trying to go all offense, I don't think that's smart, because you can throw in Torrey Craig there if you're even trying, or even Patrick Williams, to kind of stretch that floor a little bit more while adding some defense. That I don't think that offense is good enough, efficient enough to where you can play the Sacramento Kings game of let's be the team that's just going to keep in mind the Sacramento Kings, for all their defensive woes, was historically one of the most efficient offenses in the NBA history last season. this team, even with Christian Wood, doesn't have the capability.
Well, I'll say this though, and here's the thing: does that allow Nikola Vucevic to then be the player that he's most successful as? Because you've got a big man who can stretch the floor from that 4 position consistently, and I mean, like his 38% is on what, like 5 3-pointers a game, something like that.
Something like that.
So like he's actually shooting a good amount of threes. It's not like he's taking like 3 of them and he's making 1. Like, so for me, does that put Vooch back in a position where, hey, I get to be the big man down low again, like where I can just back to the basket, kill these dudes that I can kill night in and night out?
No, because that can never happen with DeMar DeRozan in the starting lineup because he's primarily a post player. He's high to mid post. So
yeah,
it just is. And again, this isn't me blaming DeMar is who DeMar is, but as long as DeMar DeRozan is on your team, and then you clog it up with, Christian Wood has shot a lot of threes over the course of his career, but he's still not somebody, and he's averaged 3.5 3-pointers per game for his career. Last year was 4.2. You still don't want to make him, let's just exclusively sit you out there at the 3-point line on offense. I just don't think you're maximizing everything at that point in time. I could be wrong. I mean, it's not one of those things where I'm like, anybody who thinks different, you're wrong. It's just, I just don't see it. I just don't see it.
I would be intrigued to see kind of how, because here's the thing. At the end of the day, if you go out and get Christian Wood, that lineup's going to be on the floor. You're going to have a lineup of Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Christian Wood, Nikola Vucevic at some point on the floor. I just wonder if that's maybe the lineup that ends up being the best case scenario for the starting lineup. And in that sense, you're basically saying we're swapping out Christian Wood for Patrick Williams. We're going offense over defense. Our bench is going to be able to clamp. I mean, our bench would be, realistically, I guess if you sign and trade Io, maybe that's how you get this done so you don't have to use your DPE. But realistically, you're probably talking about Alex Caruso, if we don't trade him in this next topic. Kobe White, Patrick Williams, Torrey Craig. Like, you got the defense on the bench still, even to mix that in.
So I mean, like I said, I get what you're getting at. I just took a look, for example, at his shot chart as well to kind of take a look at it. Christian Wood, even with his 3-point shooting, is still most effective between 5 and 12 feet from the basket.
Yeah.
That's still so similar to DeMar DeRozan and Nikola Vucevic.
No,
so
100%.
Yeah, I like I said, maybe Billy. If Billy decides to actually coach, I mean, maybe he can figure it out. I don't know. I have no idea. I do not know. Stick a gum. Like, hey, listen. You got to find it. You got to find it, man. But with that said, next up. I gotta kill Billy Donovan once every episode. We're gonna talk about an interesting Alex Caruso trade proposal by Chat Now Sports, I believe is what the outlet is. We'll break that down. Pat got the details on that one. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you guys about one of our sponsors, and that is FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend on betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Pat. Another day, another Bulls trade proposal. This one involving Alex Caruso. You got the details on that proposal there, Pat?
I do. This was proposed by Bleacher Report. They basically gave out all the trades that every team could make. One trade for every team. They did a it's funny because this is where the Royce O'Neal trade proposal came from. I'm not a fan, but on the Dallas Mavericks side, it talks about the Dallas Mavericks possibly acquiring Alex Caruso from the Chicago Bulls for Jaden Hardy, JaVale McGee, and a 2025 second-round pick. Remember, the Chicago Bulls traded away their second-round pick for 2025. Is that going to the Spurs, I believe? I think that's going to the Spurs. So the Bulls in 2025 are going to be devoid of draft capital. So that would get you some draft capital back in there. JaVale McGee adds to that maybe big man front line. And then Jaden Hardy, of course, is your young point guard who many people believe it could be a guy who could be a point guard of the
Jaden
future.
Hardy as a point guard?
I mean, what is he? What's Jaden Hardy? 6'2", 6'1"? Like he's a point guard. I'm not tripping on that.
Jaden Hardy plays nothing but shooting guard there, brother.
They literally list him as a point guard.
No, I'm not saying that you're wrong, but Jaden Hardy does not play point guard at all.
Jaden Hardy didn't play much last season either. There's that. Jaden Hardy was like 13 minutes a game. You know what it is, though? In Dallas, it's like point guard in name on the floor, but Luka's the point.
Fluid. Yeah, everything's fluid there. So
maybe Jaden Hardy comes in and he's a point guard for the Chicago Bulls in that sense. Anyway, at the end of all of it, right? You had a 21-year-old, I should say, who in 14 minutes was 8 points a game, 43% from the field, 40% from the three-point line, though. Would you make a trade like this for Alex Caruso? Again, asking the question, do you go all in on offense over defense?
Well, I think you're also going upside here, Jaden Hardy, and like what he showed before he was drafted. Jaden Hardy has some promise. And so I think ultimately we just heard that the Bulls just at the end of last season only wanted 2 first-round picks back for Alex Caruso. That's what they wanted. That was the barrier. That's how you got into the conversation. To flip from that to a second-round pick in Jaden Hardy in less than a year, I don't know if I see them take. Like, I like Jaden Hardy as a player. Generally, I like the promise he has. I like his potential. He's 6'3", 198 pounds. In that case, then I guess, are you doubling down and keeping Iotis? I don't know, bro. Like, I don't really like the trade. I like the pieces, but I don't necessarily like the pieces for Alex Caruso, if that makes sense.
It's such a weird one to me because it's like Caruso's a direction right now, right? And it doesn't feel like it for Bulls fans, but he is. Alex Caruso being on our team means that the Chicago Bulls are going to be a defensive-minded team. If you move on from Alex Caruso, I think that changes the direction of this team. And then the question you have to ask yourself is that direction going to fit with what this team is? If you go out and get Jaden Hardy, you've already got Javon Carter. That's not a bad 1-2 punch at the point guard position for you. I do think he is a point guard. Even coming out of college, he played the point guard position. I think in Dallas, Luka's the point guard. So, like, I'm not going to take the ball out of Luka's hands. Like, I don't care what you do. It's like, hey man, I'm a point guard. Not here, you not. What is it? It was like when Russell Westbrook went to Washington. It was like, hey, what position you play? Point guard? No, for real. What position you play? Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's one of those situations.
I mean, listen, Bradley Beal's playing point guard next season. Anything's possible.
Gross. But to me, I wouldn't be mad at this move. I think that Hardy went into a situation that he didn't get the time to go out there and prove who he was on a consistent basis, even though every time we saw him play more minutes, he seemed like somebody who could be a good lead guy for a team. I wouldn't be mad at the move. I think it would just be a completely different direction for the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely changes things at that point. Like that's a major change to the Bulls rotation. Everything you're doubling down. At that point, you're really saying Javon Carter is that guy, right? Like you're doubling down on his defense even more. Like I said, unless you keep Ayo Dosunmu and you think Ayo's going back to kind of the way he played defense his rookie year, but
yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, I don't necessarily hate the trade. I feel like that's one of those trades that we'll make and we may initially be like, hey man, that may hit us very hard on the defensive side of the ball. But who knows? A year or so development, Jaden Hardy, you may look at that and then say, hey, we got a 21-year-old, whatever guard position he's going to play, that comes in and that shot the ball. I think he still shot, if I'm not mistaken, about 40% from three his rookie year.
Yeah.
So
are we too behind in our thinking on that though? That's kind of the question, right? Because it feels like we're thinking like the Bulls have always been, right? You got to have that defense. You got to be able to stop guys on the other end. But at the end of the day, right, we're in an offensive NBA where me and you both talked about the Kings last year. If they could play a little bit of defense, they would have won that series. Like every time they played just a smidgen of defense, the Warriors had no idea what the heck to do. And it just wasn't something that they could keep up consistently. I think the Bulls still have a ton of defense on their team, right? If you bring Jaden Hardy in, to me, that's probably your starter at the point
Jaden
guard
Hardy?
position.
No, he's not. No.
You
No,
wouldn't
come
start him? You wouldn't go full youth at that point?
No, I mean, it's not like you're trading Zach DeMar. Like, you still got, no.
Jaden Hardy over, Javon Carter's our starting point guard probably this season.
Yeah, he's our starting point guard.
You wouldn't go Jaden Hardy over Javon Carter?
No.
Okay. I probably would.
On 2K, yeah. In real life, no.
I mean, even in real life, because at that point I'm going with, hey, we need the young buck to take that next step. Like, listen, I love Javon Carter. We know what Javon Carter is. Javon Carter's Pat Bev. Right? Like, at least with Jaden Hardy, there is the upside that comes with that. Like you talked about, if you go out and acquire him, I would probably be somebody who'd be more in favor of starting him and then seeing how he works with a Zach LaVine, a DeMar DeRozan, a Vooch, and how he sets guys up. Because in college, he wasn't. I'm not even gonna get, not college. I'm sorry. I said college. The G League is what I meant.
Yeah.
He was a scorer. Like you going out there to score. He was a, I don't know.
Here's what I'll say. I mean, at that
Javon
point,
Carter ain't exactly Mr. Facilitator either. So,
but at that point, I'm not even putting Jaden Hardy over Kobe White at that point. I'd rather start Kobe White if we're just going to try to go all offense. Now, I will say to support your argument, though, Jaden Hardy started 5 games last season. In those 5 games, he averaged 21 points per game, 5 rebounds, 3.2 assists on 34% shooting from three-point range and 38% shooting from, while you averaged 21 points per game shooting the ball 38% from he was just jacking shots up, bro.
Hey, bro.
19 shots to get 21 points. That's crazy. That's wild, bro.
Hey.
Like
130 million down in Houston, baby. I told y'all. Y'all be thinking I'm tweaking out here. $130 million down in Houston, baby.
Bro, that's Dylan Brooks plays a lot better defense than Jaden Hardy does.
Dylan Brooks got 80. That is Fred VanVleet.
Oh, if you're Fred VanVleet, I didn't even think about that's even.
Fred VanVleet put up.
Bro, shout out to Fred VanVleet for getting paid this offseason, bro.
Hey,
he may have the swindle of the offseason. Matter of fact, go give it up for Fred VanVleet for what he did.
Hey, no cap. Dylan Brooks might have the swindle of the offseason because everybody down in Houston was like, we got him, but like 80? Like 80? 80 million is crazy.
Wait, didn't it come out that it was more than 80? It's like 84, actually. Like, it came
with
out more
all the incentives and stuff like that. Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's tough too, because it's like when you look at Dylan Brooks' game. First off, everybody do yourselves a favor and just Google Dylan Brooks whenever you can. When you look at his game over the last 2 years,
picture is crazy.
Hey, bro, it's crazy every time. It don't matter. Like, you just got to know. But over the last 2 years, Dylan Brooks has just steadily gotten worse at everything that anybody shot him any bail on being good at.
Absolutely.
So it's like 2 years ago, 80 mil Dylan Brooks. All right, I kind of can see that. Last year and the year before that, Dylan Brooks, it's like, you got that man $80 million? Are y'all crazy?
$80 million for Dylan Brooks. But all right, man, let's get up off that. Next up, we're going to be asking and talking about
Dylan Brooks per 36s look bad, bro. You know when your per 36 look bad, bro. What is he doing up there with that picture, bro? What is he doing? Hey, bro, that man per 36 from last year, say 39% from the field, 32% from the 3-point line, 17 points a game. Bro, that's a lot. Oh, how many shots they say for 36?
That's crazy.
Bro, they said wild. That man went 6 for 16 per 36, bro.
That's crazy. Anyway, bro, let me get into my damn transition, Pat. Next up, we're going to be talking about what the timeline is on the Bulls possibly going rebuild, man. Before we get into that, I want to remind you guys that Locked On Bulls is free and available on every podcasting app and platform of your choice, as well as YouTube and the Odyssey app. Make sure you guys check in and tune in with us on your podcasting app and platform of your choice. But all right,
let's go ahead and get into it.
That was Dylan Brooks.
All right, bro. So a lot of Bulls fans are clamoring, asking for the Bulls to go full rebuild. And me, you were talking a little bit before we went on air. I've said over on Bull Central a couple of times, like I give it, if the Bulls aren't near Eastern Conference finals contention within the next 2 years, the Bulls may seriously consider a full rebuild at that point. You got a 30-year-old Zach LaVine at that point who you're paying damn near $50 million per year. If you're not, at least, if you're still hovering around questioning if you're going to make it out the first round, I think that may be when the Bulls may start to look possibly at a full rebuild. And by full rebuild, I just mean trading off Zach. Like, that's basically what I mean by that. I don't mean like sending off a P. Well, it could be. You never know, because P. Will, if he gets to the extension, it may kick in by then, and we could be looking at even moving P. Will. So, what do you think that timeline is on a rebuild for the Chicago Bulls?
I mean, I think this year is the most pivotal year. I think that this year is the year where if the Bulls don't do something this year, listen, it's weirder in the NBA to say it, but they've done the things to remove the excuses. You can't come here to come into this season and say that the Bulls didn't address the point guard position. They went out and got a good point guard. Now, is he great? No. But guess what? He shouldn't have to be great. Patrick Beverley wasn't great. Patrick Beverley was good enough. Javon Carter is good enough. And the Chicago Bulls should be able to get the job done with the team they have. And now the point guard position being addressed. Kobe White is good enough off of your bench. He's been working with dribble too much again this offseason, so hopefully he continues to get better. But he's even better off your bench now to where you've got a solid bench point guard, even if you don't bring back Ayo Dosunmu. We saw him play pretty well last season at that point guard position, some alongside Zach LaVine. You know, so like I'm sitting here and I'm like, you didn't make amazing moves. You made moves to remove the excuses. If you come out of this season and first off, don't get back to where you were 2 seasons ago when DeMar DeRozan basically just put the team on his back and got you to the playoffs. If you can't even get back to that, then it's time to blow this thing up. That's a different scenario. That is, we gave this thing a real run. We gave this thing a 3-year run. And you know what? We either regressed or we weren't good enough to improve after every season. That's when you start to look to blow things up. I'm not one where it's like, oh, this didn't work out, you got to get rid of these guys day one. Y'all know how I am. And at that point, we've seen years of Zach LaVine probably being a similar guy. We've seen years of what DeMar DeRozan is. We've seen years of what Vooch is. We know the answers to all of these questions. At that point, you're not saying that somebody's going to get leaps and bounds better in one season.
I hear you. That's all I got to say on that. Listen, bro, like AK's way, like I get what you're saying on this. There's no way. I don't think there's any way that this front office tries to go full rebuild. Now, I think that a serious retooling, especially looking at DeMar DeRozan's contracts coming off the books, they may decide to file the career-ending injury exception next year to kind of double down and add even more value to that free agency, that cap space next year with removing Lonzo Ball's full $20 million. The reason why I think they didn't file this year is that they're so far over the salary cap. Had they filed the career-ending injury exception for Lonzo, they still wouldn't have. It still would have had the mid-level exception. With this year, you get a disabled player exception that you can use regardless. So, I think that they may try to make another serious move next season if this doesn't, work out to where you're making it to like an E. I don't think they have the expectations to make it to ECF. I think this was the move to get them back on pace to where they were, like you said, 2 years ago. And then next season, after seeing how this season goes, is where they're trying to make the big swings. They improved in the margins this offseason. Very smart, strategic offseason. But I think next offseason is where they give it that final go of, okay, we're going to bring in a high-level talent, high contract to this team, and then we'll see what we can run back. And if that doesn't work, you got a year to maybe that following trade deadline after that, then we're going to start looking at chopping some heads at that point.
I think you just got your answers, Demito. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, listen, if P. Will doesn't pop off this season, P. Will is what P. Will is. If Kobe White doesn't figure it out this year, he's a role player off your bench. Hopefully he's solid. Ayo Dosunmu may or may not be back. We'll see kind of what that ends up being. If Zach LaVine doesn't, take that next step to me as a leader, I think he's a great scorer. If he doesn't take that next step as a leader this year, guess what? He'll be going around to other teams being the perfect number 2 for people to go out and try and win with, right? Like, so I think that.
Oh yeah, Zach LaVine ain't making no leaps as a leader. He is.
Well, and that's the thing. That's Zach LaVine can be 25 to 28 points a game. The question mark is, can he be the guy that's able to go out and lead you to be better? I don't foresee that. I just personally don't. But again, like that doesn't mean that the Bulls are going to sell guys off to basically say we're not going to improve or we're not going to try and get pieces. I think that's when you start to make trade moves and you say, hey, we'll give you Zach LaVine. You send us back a couple of young players that are going to be able to develop, right? You kind of go into that OKC mode where it wasn't a total rebuild with OKC, right? When they moved on from Russ, they already had Shea in the building. Heck, they were trying to make the playoffs. They made the playoffs that next year after moving on from Russ. And almost beat. It wasn't that the Russ team they almost beat in the playoffs?
I don't remember.
Wasn't that the Russ
follow
Rockets that they almost beat in the playoffs, I think,
I
with Shea and Chris Paul over there? But you know what I mean? Like that, those are the things to me that I could see the Bulls doing. It doesn't mean you go full rebuild, like we're going to win 6 games. It means kind of what we've always said. The Bulls are probably going to be a team that go out and try to win 30 to 35 games and just find their star in that span of trying to do all of that. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's not the same league like it was back in the day. More guys than not are being found in that 15 to 18 range, 20 range, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bulls were able to find a nice.
Well, not if you're the Chicago Bulls.
Not if you're the Bulls. I mean, hey, Dalen Terry.
I still like a Dalen Terry a lot. It's just, hey man, let's see what he's gonna be. That's it, man. I got nothing left, bro. We'll see what happens with the rebuild. I think it comes down to this. AK is a very stubborn guy. And I think also when the stubborn, that doesn't necessarily mean a negative connotation. Stubbornness worked out for Denver. They're them refusing to move off Mike Malone and their players there and sticking to a lot of their players. And Jamal Murray, after the ACL injuries, it ends up paying off. So I just think that AK is going to hold out as long as he can on this roster. And we'll see if it ends up paying off for him and the Chicago Bulls. I guess that's what we'll leave that at.
Hey, man. Follow us on everything at Locked On Bulls. You can follow me on everything at Pat the Designer. And watch out for Dylan Brooks, man. He's on the prowl.
You guys can follow me at CEO Haize, CEO Haize, and thank you for making Locked On Bulls your first listen every day. For Pat the Designer, I'm Haize. This has been Locked On Bulls. We about you. Peace, y'all.
Peace.